The hidden hand, what the World Bank and IMF don't want you to know. What the World Bank and IMF don't want you to know. What if the institutions we're told exist to help the world are actually pulling the strings behind a global agenda? The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, are often portrayed as saviors of struggling economies, but what if their true purpose is far more sinister? What if these financial giants are not just lenders of last resort, but architects of a system designed to control nations, exploit resources, and keep the developing world in perpetual debt? Who really benefits from their policies, and why do so many countries end up worse off after accepting their help? Let me take you on a journey behind the curtain of these powerful institutions. A journey that will make you question everything you thought you knew about global finance. A modern-day colonialism? Picture this. It's the 1980s, and a small African nation is drowning in debt. Desperate for relief, they turn to the IMF for a loan. The deal sounds simple. Accept our money, follow our rules, and your economy will recover. But the rules are brutal. Cut public spending, privatize water and electricity, and open your markets to foreign corporations. Fast forward a decade, and the country is in ruins. Hospitals are understaffed, schools are crumbling, and unemployment is through the roof. The wealthiest 1% are thriving, while the rest of the population struggles to survive. Sound familiar? This isn't just one story, it's the story of dozens of nations across the global south. So, here's the question. Is this economic reform, or a deliberate strategy to keep nations dependent on foreign aid and investment? Critics argue that the World Bank and IMF aren't solving poverty, they're perpetuating it. Who really profits? Now let's talk about resources. Imagine a country rich in oil, gold, or rare minerals. You'd think they'd be wealthy, right? Wrong. Time and time again, we see resource-rich nations trapped in cycles of poverty. Why? Because the World Bank and IMF loans often come with conditions that force these countries to open their resources to exploitation by foreign corporations. Take the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example. It's one of the most resource-rich countries on Earth, yet it remains one of the poorest. Why? Because multinational corporations extract its wealth, leaving little for the people. Is it a coincidence that the riches of these nations flow out to the global elite while their people remain impoverished? Who's really in control? Here's where it gets even more intriguing. The World Bank and IMF are headquartered in Washington, D.C., and their leadership has historically been dominated by Western powers, particularly the United States. The U.S. holds veto power over major decisions, effectively giving it control over the institution's policies. So, ask yourself this. Is this a global effort to fight poverty, or a tool for maintaining Western dominance in a post-colonial world? Critics argue that these institutions are less about economic development and more about enforcing a global order that benefits the wealthy elite. A new world order? Now let's dive into the conspiracy theories. Some believe the World Bank and IMF are part of a larger plan to create a centralized global economy. By tying nations into a web of debt and dependency, these institutions could be laying the groundwork for a world government controlled by a handful of powerful nations and corporations. Is this just a wild theory, or are we witnessing the slow erosion of national sovereignty in the name of global development? The rise of digital currencies and global financial surveillance only adds fuel to these suspicions. Are countries fighting back? In recent years, some nations have begun to push back against the influence of the World Bank and IMF. Countries like Argentina and Ecuador have defaulted on their debts or renegotiated their terms, while others have turned to alternative lenders like China. But breaking free from the grip of these institutions is no easy task. Why do so many countries remain trapped in their web, and what happens to those who try to escape? The stories of nations that defy the IMF often end in economic turmoil and political instability, raising the question, is this a coincidence or a warning to others? Who really runs the world? The World Bank and IMF operate under the guise of economic development and global stability, but their actions tell a different story, one of control, exploitation, and inequality. Are these institutions truly working for the betterment of humanity, or are they the financial enforcers of a global elite? As we dig deeper into their history and policies, one thing becomes clear. The truth behind the World Bank and IMF is far more complex and far darker than they want us to believe. The next time you hear about a country receiving a bailout or a development loan, ask yourself, who really benefits? And at what cost? The answers might just change the way you see the world.